Well, New York's highest-ranking Republican congressman and chair of the House Homeland Security Committee is making some serious waves for holding hearings on what he sees as the rising terror threat caused by the radicalization of Muslim Americans and their refusal to cooperate with law enforcement. Now, since announcing his plans back in December, the Long Island Republican has been protested, criticized, and even targeted recently with threatening phone calls. Yet he is refusing to back down, and the first hearing is scheduled to take place tomorrow in Washington. Congressman King is joining us tonight from the Capitol Rotunda on the eve of this very controversial event. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Liz, thank you.
So you have really been in the center of a firestorm all day long. I've been receiving all sorts of statements from all over the place calling on you to call off these hearings, and you are not going to do so unless somehow you've changed your mind. I assume you haven't.
No, I am absolutely not going to call off the hearings. It's my absolute obligation to hold these hearings, and quite frankly, I cannot understand why anyone can honestly oppose these hearings being held. For instance, when I spoke with the White House the other evening, they certainly told me to go ahead with the hearings. Spoke to Dennis McDonough, the President's Deputy National Security Advisor. I mean, I would have gone ahead with the hearings anyway, but he called me because of the speech that he gave on Sunday night where he was talking about the radicalization threat. And in his speech, he said a very real and a very serious threat is al-Qaeda's radicalization of the Muslim American community. This is a concerted policy by al-Qaeda. They've made this their main priority right now is to go under the radar screen, take Americans living here legally, attempt to radicalize them and use them against the United States. There's been a number of instances of that. So it's not just me saying it. It's the President's own Deputy National Security Advisor. Eric Holder says he lies awake at night because of the growing radicalization. And Janet Napolitano says that we are at a highest threat level now since 9/11 because of this radicalization by al-Qaeda. So how anyone could say that I shouldn't investigate this is absolutely beyond me.
Okay, but Congressman, how is it that you plan to avoid making it look like you're actually singling people out and scapegoating them? Because that's what the Muslim American community is most concerned about. They feel, and certain people have said, that they feel that they're being targeted and singled out.
Well, you know, people say this, but the reality is that if the President's own National Security Advisor says that al-Qaeda is targeting Muslim Americans, who should I be investigating? The Sons of Italy or the Knights of Columbus? The reality is you go where the group is, and right now it's within the Muslim American community. Now, I've said it time and again, the overwhelming majority of Muslim Americans are outstanding Americans. But the other reality is that al-Qaeda is recruiting within that community. So how could I not investigate that? Are we going to be so politically correct that I don't investigate it, that I instead bring in other religions, other ethnic groups to somehow show them being diverse? The fact is, that's where the threat is coming from. That's what I'm going to investigate. And if people have a problem with me, they should also have a problem with the White House, because they're saying the same thing.
You have been saying on a number of interviews today and over the week that your opponents, these sort of unnamed opponents, are responsible for the hysteria, which is your word, surrounding this particular event. Who are you speaking about specifically?
Well, I'm speaking primarily about the Committee on American-Islamic Relations, which the mainstream media repeatedly fails to identify as an unindicted co-conspirator in a major terrorist funding case, the Holy Land Foundation case, which the FBI director will not allow any of his people to deal with because of its involvement in this terrorist funding case. They've started it. It's been picked up by the mainstream media. I don't think I've said anything since these hearings were announced that should cause any concern other than the fact that there's going to be a hearing into the radicalization of the Muslim American community, which the White House, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security all say is a major problem.
Okay, but the criticism has not been limited to that particular organization. I mean, for example, just today you have the Manhattan Borough President, Scott Stringer, who is, of course, a Democrat, saying that he thinks it's unconscionable for you to shirk your duties as Homeland Security Committee Chairman. He believes you should be focusing on getting more anti-terror funds for New York City. Unconscionable is Scott Stringer's words, not mine, but what's your response to that?
Well, first of all, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So he's saying that even though there's a major threat coming against the United States, as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, I should not investigate it?
No,
in that case, I would say he should take an IQ test.
I think that he's also saying that he feels that this particular these set of hearings actually makes New Yorkers less safe instead of more safe.
So he's saying that if I show the threats against the United States and we identify those threats, and we get more action against those threats, somehow that makes us more susceptible to attack. That's nonsense. I mean, this is the type of lunacy that I'm up against over the last 2 months, saying if a threat is there and we investigate where the threat is coming from, somehow that makes us less safe. I guess maybe then police should get rid of their detectives. I don't know.
And you're also actually not limited to this particular hearing. You have said that you expect these hearings to go on for a year and a half, or if not more.
Well, I'll be chairman for at least the next 21 months, and what I'm saying is this is a serious problem. We are certainly going to do a hearing into radicalization of the American prison system. Anyone knows anything about the terror threat knows how significant that's become, the radicalization of the prison system. There's also the cyber terrorism that's becoming, for instance, Major Hassan. He became a radical and a terrorist over the internet, dealing with Imam Alaki in Yemen. This was a self-radicalization process carried out by Major Hassan. There's been other cases like that. So this is the reality we are faced with. I don't want to wake up the morning after the next major attack and say, oh, I didn't do the investigation I should have that could have prevented this attack because Scott Stringer was opposed to it.
What are you hoping to get out of it, though? I mean, at the end of this investigation, you will have what information specifically that you don't believe that you already have? You seem quite convinced that there is, in fact, a problem.
Well, right. What I am attempting to do, and I think we'll succeed at, especially when people watch the hearing tomorrow, there will be a greater awareness in the Muslim American community about how severe the threat is. I am having Muslims testify tomorrow. They are going to talk about the radicalization in their communities, what it's done, and the lack of support they've gotten from their leadership and from the imams in the mosques. They're going to talk about how they've actually been threatened when they've gone to the FBI. One man, his nephew, a Somali young man, was taken by a mosque. He ended up in Somalia. He was murdered. And yet when the uncle went to the FBI, the imams, the people in the mosque, put pressure on him to stop. There's other case of an African-American man from Tennessee whose son was converted, was radicalized, was sent to Yemen, was arrested in Yemen, came back and carried out horrific crimes because of this radicalization. And they're going to talk about how horrible this radicalization is, how extensive it is, how sophisticated it is, and what little support they get from their leadership when they try to get assistance.
And then what, Congressman? In other words, you'll have this information, and then what will you do with it? Will you call for some kind of crackdown on radicalization in the United States? I mean, and what would that look like?
Well, no. First of all, what we will do is, if we can get the Muslim American community to realize the extent of the radicalization, to get the mainstream media to finally learn something about the extent of radicalization rather than accepting press handouts from CARE, then I am hoping that the Muslim American community will get different leadership than groups like CARE. They will get different imams rather than like those who are trying to quash investigations, trying to obstruct and actually hurting their own community. So that's the main thing that can come from the investigation, and I think if that happens, that's pretty significant.
You know, there's also been some questions about your own background and the fact that you used to support the IRA. You have said that you would investigate the IRA if you thought there was a localized threat somehow that coming from the Irish community. Do you think this criticism is actually fair?
No, it's not fair. Well, it's people can ask the question, but if they knew what they were talking about, they would realize it's unfounded. President Bill Clinton, British Prime Minister Tony Blair have both said that I contributed a tremendous amount to bringing about peace in Ireland because I took a real interest in the north of Ireland. I knew there were elements in the IRA that wanted to go to the peace table, led by Gerry Adams. That's why I worked with President Clinton so closely during the 1990s, why I worked so closely with British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who was recently as last week, commended me for my efforts on it. And President Obama offered me the ambassadorship to Ireland. He asked me to be his United States ambassador to Ireland. Now, I don't think any of them would have said those things, or the president would have made that offer if there was anything at all in my background that was questionable.
And just in parting, if you continue this all the way through, say, the summer of 2012, you'll be up for re-election then at this time, right? I mean, isn't there a political element to this? There is a conservative element that it will be supporting you at that time.
Well, there's also going to be people in the media and others who are going to oppose me. Liz, I lost too many friends on September 11th, too many friends, too many neighbors to make this a political issue. Just like it was not politically popular when I was one of the only members of Congress who stood by the Muslim community in the 1990s when they were under siege in Bosnia, when they were under siege in Kosovo, when they just barely achieved their independence in Macedonia. I was the one who went to the Balkans. I was the one who voted to support sending American troops in to protect innocent Muslims in Bosnia, who went in 1996, the first elections in Sarajevo, who supported the air power that we used in Kosovo. So I don't make decisions based on politics. I make them on what I believe is the right thing to do, whether they're popular or unpopular.
Well, Congressman King, we will be following this story, of course. I want to thank you so much for making time for us this evening.
Liz, thank you.